promised to show you how to make an essential oil diffuser, aromatherapy pendant. I'll make actually a necklace. So first of all, you need some kind of stamp that would be round, but of course you don't have to use a stamp. You don't have to use what I'm using here. You can use a pomegranate or whatever other veneer you want. I have pressed my stamp because it has to be round. You can make it square, but it's more complicated, and I don't want to show you something too complicated. This is the easiest way of making it. So I'm going to shave so I can get a mica shift effect. The thing is that no matter what type of veneer you do, especially if you do a mica shift or a mokumegane, make sure that you choose one where holes in it will fit the pattern, because you'll have on the front part to poke some holes so the scent has how to come out, you know, has room to come out. So after I did the shaving for the mica shift, of course I will be leveling my sheet nicely, and then I choose a round cutter and I simply place it. You will need a baking support that is spherical, pretty much. I have this spherical light bulb. The other thing that you need to do, once you place it nicely and you're sure that you don't have any air bubbles trapped in, you will have to trim the edge straight, that is horizontal, because right now it will be at an angle. The edges will be at an angle on the light bulb. So use your rigid blade to pretty much trace the line, and then use your X-Acto knife to trim away everything that's under that line until you reach the end of the cut. And clean it nicely, and after you do that, gently press down the edges until they meet the surface of the light bulb. Now for the back, I just want some pretty marbled mica shift effect, so I am just twisting and turning my pearlescent mix until I'm happy with the look, and then I'll flatten it to the point that I can get it through the pasta machine. And you go on the thickest, of course, in both cases. And I will place it on the light bulb, the same as I placed the front, and do the exact same thing, because these things will be exactly like a lentil bead. They have to lay pretty much flat against each other. So again, you use your rigid blade to cut the line, and then your X-Acto knife to trim underneath, and then you just gently bring the edges down until they meet the surface of the light bulb. Then you will need some kind of very tiny cutters. They don't have to be round. You can use coffee stirrers or you know, a pen, a broken pen, and place your holes where they match whatever pattern you have there. I've chosen this stamp because it had some little flowers, and I'm placing the holes exactly where those flowers are on the stamp, after which I'm removing the inside of those holes using my X-Acto knife. And then I am ready to bake. For the necklace part, I mean, you can do just the pendant. Okay, I'm making some beads for the necklace. All I'm doing is first to bake some cabochons in the tear shape of the cabochon mold of Sculpey. Alright, so my two halves are baked. I have sanded and buffed them, and I was very careful to sand to make sure that they do fit one on top of the other well. And now I am using a mix 1-to-1 a silver and graphite pearl, and a very detailed texture sheet that is not very deep, because this will have to look like old silver. So I am taking my imprint from the texture sheet, after which I'm trying to figure out, because this will make my hinge and the bail at the same time. We will use something like this, not this exact thing. This will go in one of the beads. So first I am going to cut the inner part of the hinge. I chose which part of the texture sheet I want to show. And then I'm cutting some straight lines. Those are temporarily cut. They will be at the edge of the lentil bead half. And then I'm using the cutter next smaller in size than the one that I used for cutting the two circles. Then I am placing some bacon bond on one end. Make sure that you choose which end that will be the top of the pendant or respectively focal piece. Then set your hinge slash bail in a nice pattern, so it would look pretty much like a piece of metal that holds the whole medallion in place. And then trim the excess flush with the bottom of the lentil bead. Then you will use a wire that will be way thicker than the one that you will use for the hinge itself. I am using here a 16 gauge, and you will need two pieces. You will see in a minute why. Take the first piece and wrap the strip around it. The strip will have to be slightly more raised towards the domed part of the bead, not flush with the bottom. So I am using the second wire, and I will be holding for support my finger behind that part of the hinge to press to form a cylinder. And then I am trimming away the excess, making sure that it's flush with the rim of the lentil bead. Then I am placing this to the side, and I will be doing the second part of the hinge. Now when you cut it, make sure that those two stripes come on each side of the middle part of the hinge, so they would fit nicely, and then make them about as wide, each of them as wide as the middle one, and then cut straight lines. I'm sorry you can see my hair a little bit too much here, but I had to make sure that I cut the line straight. Then again do that temporary trim, and trim away the very middle, and use again that round cutter that's one size smaller than the one you used for the lentil beads. And see, I got the right one a little bit too wide. And then cut again part of the excess of the two strips. Place some bacon bond on one end of the bottom lentil bead, and then place again your piece. Trim the excess, fold over the rim, the same as you did with the front, and then again using your X-Acto knife, trim flush with the bottom of the lentil bead. Be very careful, because all those ends have the tendency to slip a little bit, so you might have to rearrange them and retrim. Then make sure that the sides match. You might have to trim a little bit to make them match perfectly. And now take those two strips and fold them over the wire on each side of the middle part of the hinge. And again, you will use the second piece of wire to press. And remember, hold your finger in the back so you'll have support. Don't press on the free clay because you're going to break the whole concoction. Hold your finger on the back so you'll have support, and then trim the excess flush with the bottom of the bottom lentil bead. Make sure everything is okay and nicely trimmed, and then you will have to wiggle a little bit that wire so it is not too snug inside those little cylinders. Don't use a lot of strength, just a little bit of wiggle, and then you will be pretty much ready to bake. Now you can skip this part if you only want to do the pendant. What I am doing is just using some more of that Beaujolais clay and doing a little bit of a mica shift with it. And I'm sorry, I have no idea what my camera did there. There were two spots in which it looked like it froze. And anyway, then I am placing my mica shift, and that's on the thinnest setting, on the cabochons that I had already baked. And pretty much I am wrapping the cabochons on top with a mica shift with the same color of the medallion, and on the back with just plain clay. Make sure that, and the trick is that the back will fasten in place the jump rings that will connect the beads to the rest of the necklace. Make sure when you place the veneer that you do not trap any air bubbles underneath. Trim nicely flush with the bottom of the cabochon, and make sure that the edge is firmly secured to the raw clay. And I'm using Bacon Bond, and honestly I started using Bacon Bond the most, way more than the TLS, because it's stronger and also is cheaper. Now with the back I am going to be securing the findings. I will have one teardrop cabochon on each side of the medallion, and then one hanging from the medallion. So on the one hanging from the medallion, I'm using that double loop pin, eye pin, and then the two beads that go on each side of the medallion, they will have a jump ring on each end. Now it's very important to connect nicely and neatly the backing with the front veneer. So trim it, and then use whatever you use, your roller, or like I use my little paintbrush handle to secure the edge, to blend the edge nicely. Once your hinge is baked, gently remove the wire from inside. You might have to use your X-Acto knife because those two halves might get a little bit stuck, but they are not hard to separate. Usually it happens right where the hinge is, because that's where you have clay on clay, raw clay. You had raw clay on raw clay. And now once again, make sure that everything is flush on the bottom of the bead. If need be, you can trim a little bit with your X-Acto knife, and then use an eye pin to put it through the hinge, and see how nicely it opens and closes. If it's too long, you can trim it a little bit, and then make a second loop on the other side of the hinge, And hold on the first one. Do not turn the pliers against just the clay. And make sure that both loops are lined up, because that's where you will connect the chain, actually the bead and then the chain. And now it's time to make the bottom, because okay, we have our little locket is opening and closing, but what will keep it closed? So we pretty much do the same thing as we did on the top, only that without making a hinge. And connecting it with bacon bond, only that this time we will put a jump ring between the raw clay and the baked lentil bead. Make sure it's perfectly aligned with the top of the medallion. And when you trim here, be careful, because again it will have the tendency to slide around. And you have to place the jump ring in the same spot, right in the middle, on both halves of the medallion. And the same as the hinge, the jump ring has to be pretty much on a horizontal line, following the horizontal of the bottom of the lentil bead, not the curve of the top. So you'll have to lift it slightly. So careful how you mold that raw clay there. As I said, I always prefer for these things the wax carving tools, and they are under $10. You can get them on Amazon, the easiest way. And again, fold the excess over the edge of the lentil bead, and then trim nicely and flush with the bottom of the lentil bead. On the second jump ring, the one that goes through the back, I have directly connected a piece of chain. You don't have to, it depends on what type of chain you are using. The one that I'm using has fairly small and delicate loops, and it's pretty much a pain to open and close them, so I just put it through the jump ring. And of course you put the jump rings with the opening inside the clay. And then once you did the back, make sure that your jump rings align, and then open your locket, and you will bake it open this time, pretty much like this. Now everything is baked. I sanded and buffed my little mica shift beads, and now I will be using a little bit of silver gilder's paste on the 4 silver endings of the medallion. Now remember, if you let it cure enough, about an hour, you can buff it. Don't use a power buff, just a soft cloth, or you can put some varnish on top of it, because otherwise if it rubs a lot against something, in time it will wear off. But this is how it looks. You see, it looks very much like real metal. So this is our little aroma essential oil diffuser locket. Now let's put it together. First, connect the beads to the medallion. Actually, I'm going to first connect a lobster clasp. And if you don't do a necklace, if you only do medallion, that's pretty much where you stop. The lobster clasp, you connect both bottom rings at the same time, and you just connect some chain on each side of the hinge. But I am making a necklace, so I will be connecting my 2 teardrop beads that have jump rings on each side, on each end. And then I will connect the one hanging from the very middle of the chain that closes the locket medallion. And this is pretty much how it will look like. So I will be attaching some chain to the beads and another lobster clasp to close it. And now, of course, what are we going to do about the inside? Now, there are these little pieces of felt that you can find in stores. I got mine from the Family Dollar for like $1.50 a pack of 20. And they have a sticky back. You just place them on the back and then drop a few drops of essential oil. I have tested essential oil on polymer clay and it's been there for over 6 months and nothing happened to the clay. So you close your locket and you have your medallion, and you can always refresh the oil inside. Happy claying!